What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to our weekly live betting breakdown where I'm going to be going through every single card, giving you a fight breakdown and a value angle for every single spot on the card. This week we're going to be going a little bit quick. We ran out of time earlier in the week. Usually we like to run this show on Thursdays, but we ran out of time, had to do some additional tape study. Very chalky card this week. It was kind of hard to find some spots, but there's a lot of props that I love for this whole entire card. So super excited to get into this one. Let's start off with the first card on the fight. Our first fight of the night. Oh, whoops. Whoop. There we go. All right, but we've got Damian Penis taking on Wes Schultz. Penis coming in 8-1. 6 feet 1 inch tall with a 79.5 inch reach. Wes Schultz 8-2, 180, 6'2", and 77 with a 77 inch reach. Now, this fight to me, this is kind of like a bilateral. There's two outcomes that could come out of this fight, right? Either Penis is going to come out here and land a huge knockout in round 1 or 2, or he's pretty green. Wes Schultz is an excellent grappler. He's going to mix in the takedowns. His wrestling's like somewhat decent. His striking is super awkward on the feet. Nothing that's going to give Penis any problems. But as far like Wes is going to look to shoot takedowns, look to get him down to the ground. Penis does get caught on the ground, like on his back a lot, and that's absolutely not a position that you're going to want to be in against Wes Schultz. But Penis has some serious power in that right hand. From what I noticed on not only his Dana White's Contender Series, but some of his other film, he'll walk forward, hold his guard like this, take his opponent's shots, and then march forward and look to land that right hand. I like a finish early here. But if this fight goes late, neither of these guys really have good cardio. You know, we saw in Wes Schultz's original Dana White's Contender Series bout against Mansour Abdul-Malik, he had some good moments in round 1. He was getting the back. He put Mansour in some dangerous positions, but ultimately he gassed out, and that led to him being TKO'd. And Penis, right, this guy ends the majority of his fights in round 1. If this fight gets stretched out in elevation, the last thing that you want on a card like this is a tired, limp Penis in round 3. Like, absolutely not something that you're going to be wanting to deal with if you have a minus 240 ticket on Penis. But for my official fight prediction on this, I'm liking Penis by round 1 knockout. I think he's going to land that right hand. I think he's actually got a better chance of knocking Wes Schultz out than Mansour Abdul-Malik did. So give me Penis by knockout, but I will say that the Wes Schultz round 1 sub is plus 800 and the round 2 sub is plus 1750. Definitely some value there just because of how green Penis is. All right, next fight. We are moving on to Eric Silva versus Francis. Oh, nope. Eric Silva taking on Francis. Come on. Eric Silva taking on Francis Marshall. Eric Silva 9-3, coming off a loss, 5'9" with a 71-inch reach. Francis Marshall 8-3, 5'9" with a 72-inch reach. Now, Eric Silva coming off a long layoff. He blew out his knee against Muhammad Naimov a few years back. Over 2 years back. This guy's been in the octagon over 2 years. But another thing I want to mention too is that every time this guy gets into the octagon, he looks a decade older. Right? From his Dana White's Contender Series bout to that fight against Muhammad Naimov, there was like 10 years that had to have passed with this guy. He cut his hair. He's all gray now. He's got a beard. He looks like an old man. But I will say that after this weigh-in, he has looked in his best shape that I've seen him in on not only the regional scene, but in his UFC career as well. Francis Marshall, this is a guy that fights close, right? He's got a split decision win over Dennis Bazooka, a split decision loss over William Gomi, and a split decision loss against Myron Santos. William Gomi and Myron Santos are very, very solid opponents. But Dennis Bazooka, I know that fight was on short notice for Marshall. But, still not a good look. I don't consider Dennis Bazooka very good. I know he hasn't fought in a while. So, maybe we can wait and see how he looks in his next UFC fight. Maybe he's gotten better. But, at the time and the place, Marshall kind of just abandoned a game plan halfway through round 2 in that fight. And he was just trading shots on the feet with Dennis. And, that's not something you want to see against anybody really. He like minus 700 is actually insane for Francis Marshall here. I don't see him being minus 700 really against anybody just because of like the way he fights. Like he's getting in close decisions. If he's not knocking somebody out or submitting them, and honestly, we haven't seen his UFC submission game, right? Like if he's not knocking guys out or submitting them, I'm, not interested in betting him at minus 700. Just because, I mean, there's 3 split decisions on his record, and he lost 2 of them. Granted, Byron Santos and William Gomi, very good fighters, but 2 split decisions, losses to good fighters, and a split decision win over a bad fighter. I don't know. Raises some concerns at minus 700. I could see maybe an early finish from Eric Silva if he's super aggressive early. I think he's got, maybe 5 minutes to finish his fight. But if this fight gets really out of round 1, I think it's Francis Marshall all day. Eric Silva gets caught on his back a lot. Francis Marshall's a pretty decent grappler. If Marshall can mix in the takedowns and, TJ Brown got a round 3 sub on Eric Silva, right? I absolutely think Francis Marshall's live for that. But as far as laying the minus 700, absolutely not. Eric Silva, from his regional scene fights, I've seen him, if he's not looking for the grappling, he's looking for a power shot. This guy fights with his hands down a lot of the times, at least on the regional scene. And he's looking to land that right hand. So maybe an early finish from, maybe Francis Marshall drops the ball, early finish from Eric Silva, or a late finish from Francis Marshall. But like I said, if this fight gets out of round 1, honestly, I'm leaning Marshall. But minus 750, minus 700, absolutely not. Like this whole card is extremely chalky. Some of these guys I agree, maybe with the line, but like Imanol Rodriguez, Imanol Rodriguez could be maybe 700 against Kevin Borjas, but Francis Marshall as a minus 700 favorite with 3 split decisions in the UFC, no thanks. Definitely looking for props on this one, but we're gonna move on to the next fight. First, let's check up the comments, see if anybody's watching, see if anybody's joined. Dude, this UFC freaking website right now is giving me some problems with the lagginess. But let's pop over to the comments, see who's joined, see who's not in here. Dude, no, come on. Where? Oh. No, dude, live. Give me back to my life. Put me back on. I don't know why it's not letting me see the comments right now. Hold on. Technical difficulties. There we go. All right. There we go. All right. Nobody watching, no viewers yet, but we are pretty late coming into this. So, Saturday night, it's like 5 hours before the fights actually start. Super excited. But no comments right now. We're going to move on. So, Regina Turin versus Ernesta Caracate. All right, so Regina's the only Mexican fighter that is an underdog on this entire card. I kind of like her as an underdog, honestly, especially after watching the weigh-ins. I was thinking Caracate was going to be like towering over her in the weigh-ins, but that's not the case. These guys size up pretty well, or these gals, I should say. Turin is definitely going to be somebody that the UFC might want to win, especially in this situation. Girls that are attractive, that bring an audience that is, could potentially, guys that aren't UFC fans could be watching her just because she's hot, are typically girls that the UFC wants to promote. She's got a pretty pop in social media too. She's got like 200 plus K followers on IG. So definitely an audience there. She's an underdog coming into this spot. 7'0", 5'7", with a 66-inch reach. Caracate 6'1", 5'9", with a 71-inch reach. Caracate fights on close margins as well. I kind of like the dog shot here. She's kind of slow. I watched like maybe 1 or 2 of her regional scene fights. I I think Karikate might have the speed advantage, but maybe she looks to grapple here. I think there could be some value on that money line just because of her size, and she's improving from every fight, and she's on her home turf. Like if this fight goes to decision, Karikate fights, she doesn't differentiate herself in a lot of these fights, and even if Regina Tureen lost, I could totally see the judges leaning towards a split decision here just to get her the win on that Mexican home turf. So, for official prediction, give me Tureen. For a bet, I haven't bet on this fight, but, for value side, probably Tureen back when she was plus 160. She's sitting at plus 130 right now. There's obviously some more meat on the bone when you're getting her at plus 160. But for a UFC debut in Mexico, she's definitely the A-side fighter here. Give me Tureen to win for an official prediction. But moving on to Javier Reyes versus Douglas Silva de Andrade. Javier Reyes, 22-5, 5'7" with a 77-inch reach. Douglas Silva de Andrade, major UFC vet, 29-6, 5'7" with a 68.5-inch reach. So, first thing I want to mention is DSDA is moving up to 145. This is going to be one of his... it's either his first fight or, I don't know exactly what he was fighting at earlier in his career, closer to his regional scene bouts, but... UFC-wise, he was a career 135er. He's moving up to 145. He's 40 years old, which is, an absolute downside in a lighter weight class, especially if he was fighting at 135 for most of his career. 40 years old is kind of crazy, but he's got some power. It's just kind of concerning here for him because, in his last fights against Cody Stamann, Miles Johns, he's landing one good punch combination for the whole fight, and that's it. He looks good with that one combination. He might wobble him or not drop him, but definitely catch his opponent off guard. And if he were to follow up, it could lead to a finishing sequence, but he's just not active anymore. He's kind of like a mild Douglas Silva de Andrade. And Javier Reyes is an older guy too. He's got a lot of regional scene experience. He's fought guys like Chris McCate on the regional scene, pretty decent regional scene fighters. But you go and look at his record and every regional scene step up in competition, he's losing. Larion Douglas, he got absolutely starched by Larion Douglas. And if this guy gets on top of you, he's got some pretty good top control. But if he's not getting on top of you, his takedowns look pretty meek. It looks to me like he's just kind of bending down and trying to grab his opponent's legs. And I'm not sure that's going to work here against Douglas Silva de Andrade. Big underdog coming into this. Let me see actually what the line's at right now. DSDA is a pretty solid underdog. Yeah, DSDA is sitting at plus 200 right now. Javier Reyes beating Justice Torres, he was super aggressive in that fight. His knees were excellent. He landed a really nice uppercut, but I don't know. His striking just seems ploddy and slow from what I've seen on the regional scene. And like I said, every step up in competition except for Justice Torres, which I don't even know if that's a step up in competition compared to Chris McCate. He's losing, So just be careful here. Cardio, the Mexico City aspect of this fight is going to be, a huge part. DSDA, I don't want to say he gasses. Actually, no. You know what? DSDA actually kind of improves in round 3. So if this fight gets to round 3, and Javier Reyes isn't able to land takedowns, I think DSDA's got a 70-something% takedown defense. If he's not able to land takedowns through the first 2 rounds, this fight could get sketchy. DSDA's got some serious power, and we've seen Javier Reyes slip before. Go back and watch that Larion Douglas fight. He got starched in round 2 after literally doing nothing for the first round and a half. For my official pick, give me Javier Reyes just because I don't really know where DSDA is at his career right now. He's looked, pretty meek, pretty unaggressive in his last 2 fights. He throws those leg kicks with power still. He's still super aggressive. But at the end of the day, Javier Reyes is the younger fighter. He's got the more upside on the career trajectory end. And the UFC probably wants him to win more than DSDA. So for this fight, my official, pick is Javier Reyes. Am I betting that? No. Am I betting anything in this fight? Maybe fight not to go the distance. Just because there might be some early finish upside for for DSDA, and there might be some late finish upside for Javier Reyes. Both these guys have pretty decent cardio. Like I said, DSDA kind of sometimes turns it up in round 3. So, I'm thinking there could be a finish here. Maybe one guy gasses, the other guy finishes the other. Javier Reyes gets some top time. Maybe DSDA overthrows one of those obscenely hard calf kicks, slips. Javier Reyes capitalizes on that, somehow ends up on top control, and then finishes him from there. I think there's plenty of ways this fight, doesn't go the distance. Maybe DSDA lands one of those one combos that I was talking about earlier on Javier Reyes and, gets that knockout. But, plenty of ways for this fight not to go the distance. So, value standpoint, maybe we look at fight doesn't go the distance. But for my official pick, give me Javier Reyes for the career trajectory upside, all that good stuff. So, let's move on. First, before we get into Christian Quinones versus Chris Moutinho, I do want to mention that we have a 7-day free trial going on in the Winnable right now. If you guys want all of my action that I have on this whole card, where all my money's at for this whole card, I got the link in the bio right now. 7 days free. You get to see what I'm playing for UFC Mexico for 7 days. Free trial. You'll get to see the bets I upload later in the week for UFC Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira. So if you guys want to see, what I have. Last year we were up over 104 units in 2025. This year we're not off to a strong start. We are down 7 units, about just 10% on the year. We're 1-2 on profitable nights so far in 2026. But I'm feeling really confident about this card, guys. I feel like there's a lot of props that might be underrated here. A lot of chalk, but there's a lot of props too that could be underrated here, and I'm pretty excited about this card. So if you guys want all of that 7-day free trial, everything that I have action on, links in the bio. Or not links, well, link is in the bio, but link is also in the description. So tap in. All right, Christian Quinones versus Chris Moutinho. Christian Quinones, 18-5, 5'8" with a 70-inch reach. Moutinho, 14-7. The majority of those losses coming by decision, and finish, and 5'7" with a 68-inch reach. So if this was literally anybody else, right? I'd be fading Chris Moutinho here, right? But it's Christian Quinones. This guy is not trustworthy, right? This guy is not a guy that you want to be laying -700 on in a fight. -700 is absolutely crazy, especially since he could gas. He doesn't train in Mexico, he could gas. This fight's taking place in Mexico City. -700 is kind of crazy against a guy that's 1-2 in the UFC. I get it, right? Chris Moutinho got called into the UFC to just take an absolute beating from Sean O'Malley. He took his beating, you know what I'm saying? And then he got knocked out by, who did he get? It was somebody who did he get knocked out by? We're going to look. It was something, he got knocked out by a guy that has some power, but he really shouldn't have been knocked out by him. And it wasn't knocked out cold. It was a standing TKO. So standing TKO in both the Sean O'Malley fight and the Guido Canetti fight. Standing TKO in both those fights, and then he gets knocked out by Malcolm Welkmaker with that signature right hook. That's his best punch. We've seen him flatline guys with that before. But, Christian Quinones is a longer Muay Thai style striker. I was at first when I was watching film for this fight, looking at that, I feel like it could have played out, or it could play out similarly to how the Sean O'Malley fight played out, just because the striking style of Quinones, he's long, he likes to stay on the outside, he mixes in the kicks, he mixes in the jab pretty well, he stays long and bounces around the outside. He's got a decent ground game, but Chris Moutinho is a pretty offensive fighter. This guy's moving forward. His face is a magnet for punches, though. This guy absorbs almost 15 significant strikes per minute. Absolutely insane for somebody with 3 fights in the UFC, absorbing almost 15 strikes per minute to the face. Not just to the face, but in total, right? Not necessarily a good look, right? But Christian Quinones, I don't see him keeping up the pace for 2-3 rounds. It could get sketchy, is all I'm saying. -700 on Quinones is not something I'm laying. I don't even think I'm betting this fight. I have No. If I was to bet this fight, I'd be betting on Chris Moutinho. In all honesty, there's no value on a guy that's minus 700, that's 1-2 in the UFC against Chris Moutinho here. Like it's like Christian Quinones is not minus 700 against anybody, even if it's Chris Moutinho. Chris Moutinho's an offensive fighter. Like he'll push the pace. If he's getting punches, like he gets punched to the face, but he looks to land. So maybe he makes Christian uncomfortable. For my official pick, I don't think I can pick Chris Moutinho in any UFC fight, but for an official pick, give me Christian Quinones. For like a value upside, if I had to bet on this fight, like if somebody were to point a gun to my head, right? Like, obviously it's going to be Christian Quinones, but from a value perspective, if somebody forced me to bet on this fight, from a value perspective, I'd have to take Chris Moutinho. I'd have to. Minus 700 on Christian Quinones is absolutely insane. Against a guy that was dominantly grappled, against Kang, against a guy that was... Hold on. Who else did he lose to? Yeah, he got subbed in round 3 by Raoni Barcelos with a broken rib. Raoni Barcelos with a broken rib, too. So, I don't know. I get Raoni Barcelos is a really good opponent, but with a broken rib, is he a really good opponent? I don't know. For my official pick, give me Christian Quinones, but, no value there. Next up, Eileen Perez taking on Macy Chiasson. Oh, again, we did the same thing. Eileen Perez taking on Macy Chiasson. Eileen Perez, 12-2 with 5'5" with a 66-inch reach. Macy Chiasson, 11-5, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. After watching the weigh-ins, Macy's a lot taller than her. Machine Gun Macy's got a serious height and reach advantage here. A serious reach advantage. If Macy just locks in and starts doing stuff, and she looked kind of aggressive in the weigh-ins. She looked kind of aggressive, more aggressive than she did in her last. Obviously we haven't seen her in the cage today yet, but more aggressive than she did in her last fight, right? So, Eileen Perez, a girl that I could see gassing in round 2, right? Maybe Eileen Perez shoots a takedown in round 3. And maybe Macy reverses it for once. Maybe Macy gets on top. Maybe Macy locks in that arm triangle and gets a gassed Eileen Perez out of there. I mean, I'm never going to trust. There's always some bias baked into the line of those girls that do OnlyFans. And Eileen Perez is a girl that's really into OnlyFans. She's doing a lot on OnlyFans. A lot more a lot of the time than these other girls. So not really, there's always some bias baked into that line. So never looking to bet these OnlyFans models that are UFC fighters. Definitely some value on Macy. It really depends on how she fights. I will say though, from her looking at her Instagram, she got there late. She got to Mexico late. Not that you can't be training with an altitude mask or, be training in conditions that simulate that Mexico City air. But, that's my only concern. Eileen Perez was there a little bit longer. Maybe her cardio turns out to be somewhat decent. But for my official pick, give me Macy. Value angle, I think there's value on Macy Chiasson money line. I think I got this fight closer to a pick 'em, honestly. Moving on. Ryan Gandra versus Jose Daniel Medina. So there's 2 punching bags. Oh, he dyed his hair blonde. That's just delightful. That's delightful. All right, well, there's 2 punching bags on this card, right? On this chalky-ass UFC card. Jose Medina, Angel Pacheco. Jose Medina has not won a fight in the UFC. And honestly, this is the fight that I think he has the best chance of winning. I don't think he's going to win. I'm going to start off by saying Ryan Gandra I'm picking to win. But Jose Medina, dude, if he's going to win a fight in the UFC, it's going to be this fight. It's going to be against Ryan Gandra. To me, Ryan Gandra sucks. There's no grappling upside here for Ryan Gandra, in my opinion, like there was for Dusko. I don't even think Ryan Gandra has all that much power. In quite honesty, you know what I'm saying? His regional team tape, he's good for maybe about 2 minutes and 30 seconds in round 1, but that's about it. that's his power just drops off a cliff after that. So betting on him at minus 700, same thing I said about Christian Quinones. I will not be betting on Ryan Gandra at minus 700. Do I think he wins? Yes. Do I think he does enough damage through maybe 2 rounds that Jose Medina just loses the first 2 rounds? Yes. But I would be betting Jose Medina here if he had some kind of offense. He just doesn't. He doesn't have any offense. Like, even if he's Homer Simpsoning these guys, getting these finishes late like he's done on this regional scene, his regional scene level of competition is trash. Guys that aren't as good as Ryan Gandra, so maybe he does do it, but I could also see him losing the first 2 rounds. What I do like here is this fight to go the distance. I don't think that Ryan Gandra has the type of power that Atiba Gauthier has, or the grappling and submission upside that Dusko Todorovic has to get Medina out of this fight. So, official prediction, give me Ryan Gandra. Betting on that, absolutely not. Value side, definitely Medina. Definitely a dog or pass situation. But gun to my head, if I'm picking a winner, it's going to be Ryan Gandra. Next, moving on to the main card, Santiago Luna versus Angel Pacheco. This is a pretty exciting matchup. This is my spotlight bout for the week. Every week I do a spotlight bout. I post it on Instagram. Just to the fight that I'm most curious to watch, honestly. So, Angel Pacheco, a guy that hasn't gotten finished on either of 2 UFC fights. I actually bet on Pacheco against Callan Loughran because I didn't think Callan was really that good. And I thought Angel could really rack up the volume, but Callan mixed in the takedowns. He did far more damage. And now I was, not high on Angel Pacheco. I was high on him in that bet against Callan Loughran, but Angel Pacheco kind of let me down in that situation. And if you go back and look at it, right, he's lost. He lost his Dana White's Contender Series. I get it was a pretty exciting fight. I get it. I understand that. I understand why the UFC signed him, just like how I understood why the UFC signed Jose Medina after fighting Magomov or that freaking Bahrainian guy. I don't even remember his name, but he's Gagiasulov. He's cut from the UFC. He sucked anyways, but I get why they signed him. Punching bag, will put up a fight, but then ultimately, probably getting finished or losing a high volume decision, just like he did against Callan Loughran, right? So Santiago Luna is a guy that is like all offense, almost no defense. This guy pushes a pace. He's very aggressive. In his last fight against Quang Lee, he got wobbled a bunch of times, 3 or 4 times in that first fight against Quang Lee, but then he ultimately finished Quang. So, good for him on the durability. I think he recovers well. And, I really think he's going to be he's going to be the first person in the UFC to finish Angel Pacheco. I think he's got some serious power. I think he's got the offensive, striking upside here to land a nasty power shot, just because Angel Pacheco is also a guy that absorbs a ton of significant strikes, just like Chris Moutinho. So for my official prediction, give me Santiago Luna by knockout. And earlier in the week, he was minus 300-400. Now he's getting up to minus 600-700. Like a lot of these guys, the parlay boys kind of took over. But he's a guy that I think that might look 700, especially minus 700. If he knocks out Angel Pacheco in the first 2 minutes and a half, how does he not look minus 700 unless he gets dropped by Angel 2 or 3 times like he did against Quang Lee? But yeah, I think he gets the finish here. I think it's going to be a round 1 knockout for Santiago Luna. That's kind of where I see the value there. Definitely a knockout, round 1 knockout. So for official prediction, Santiago Luna, round 1 knockout. Next, Imanol Rodriguez versus Kevin Borjas. Now, I know a lot of people were let down by Imanol when he lost to Joseph Morales in TUF. But Joseph Morales, now that they updated the rankings, is now a ranked fighter in the UFC. He's coming off of 2 phenomenal performances against Alibi Idris, who just won, and Matt Schnell, who used to be good. So taking a loss to Joseph Morales, a guy that's got far more UFC experience, far more experience in general, doesn't age so bad. I think Imanol has every way to win here. I honestly don't see a way for Kevin Borjas to win here unless he's somehow able to just keep it at a distance boxing range. I really don't see a path to victory for Borjas. So for my official prediction, give me Imanol Rodriguez by Give me Emanol by sub. Give me Emanol by sub. I think he's got every path to victory here. We're going to speed run this short live stream today, boys, because we got the fight starting in less than 4 hours, or less than 5 hours. So, we got to prepare a little bit more. We locked in all the bets, like I said, but, just posting, staying on top of it. But yeah, let's move on. Edgar Chairez versus Felipe Bunes. Felipe Bunes, I think, has finishing upside 6 to 7 minutes through this fight, right? He's a pretty excellent, submission practitioner. Super violent early, but then he just kind of falls off a cliff with that gas tank. I don't think that's going to happen to Edgar Chairez. I think Edgar Chairez is going to really put it on him if this fight gets into round 2 and round 3. I could also see Bunes shooting a sloppy takedown and Edgar locking up a really nasty guillotine. He's got a pretty insane front choke series. For my official prediction, give me Edgar. I know I liked it better when it was minus 300, but still, Emanol, Edgar, and we'll talk about Brandon Moreno. All those guys are kind of parlay pieces this week to me. Some of them aren't. Christian Quinones not. Francis Marshall not. But some of these other guys, honestly could be parlay pieces. Like Felipe Bunes, unless he's getting a round 1 sub, and maybe that's how you play it. Maybe you play Felipe Bunes round 1 sub, or put Edgar Chairez in a parlay, right? I feel like that's kind of the best way to play this, right? I feel like you're getting value on any of those guys, Chairez, Emanol, or Brandon Moreno. If you're parlaying those guys, I think there's some value there. But for my official prediction, give me Edgar Chairez by round 2 or round 3 knockout. I think Felipe Bunes is not going to be able to get the takedowns. If he does, maybe Edgar Chairez spends round 1 on his back, defends the submissions well, or uses that guillotine and front choke series to get out of dangerous positions, keep this fight on the feet, and then extend it through 3 rounds. Give me Edgar Chairez by round 2, round 3 knockout. I feel like he's going to really pour it on Felipe the later this fight goes, and I feel like he's, if Felipe doesn't finish him, he's not going to win. And I don't think Edgar Chairez gets finished by Felipe Bunes. But to play that, maybe, I don't think it's going to happen, but that's happened before, and I've played situations where it's happened before. Like, I didn't think Renat Fakhretdinov was going to knock out Andreas Gustafsson in round 1, but that was his only win condition. We played Renat Fakhretdinov round 1 KO at plus 1,400 and Gustafsson on the money line. So that is a way to look at it if you think these fights have like a bilateral outcome. Give me Edgar Chairez to win by round 2, round 3 knockout. Moving on. Daniel Zellhuber versus, again, I keep hitting that link. Daniel Zellhuber versus King Green, formerly known as Bobby Green. All right, Daniel Zellhuber, 15-3, 6'1" with a 77-inch reach. Bobby Green, 33, 17-1. 5'10" with a 71-inch reach. Daniel Zellhuber's going to have a huge reach advantage here, but he didn't really even use it against Michael Johnson or Trey Ogden. Daniel Zellhuber is a massive, historic, serial ball dropper. This guy loves to just drop the ball. If there's balls to drop, if this guy was an NFL wide receiver, he'd be out there dropping balls. He'd be out there dropping so many balls. He wouldn't catch anything. He's a serial ball dropper, right? Especially as a large favorite. The most recent occurrence was against Michael Johnson, where this guy lost a decision. Lost almost every, to me, he lost every round, but he lost the decision to 800-year-old Michael Johnson, and before that, he lost a striking battle, a striking match to Trey Ogden. I mean, that's just terrible. Absolutely one of the most untrustworthy fighters in the UFC, but against an aging King Green, he's coming off a great win against Lance Gibson. I mean, he looked great. Not that Lance Gibson is good, but he looked solid. I think Daniel Zellhuber wins. How can you not pick Daniel Zellhuber against a 40-year-old Bobby Green? But does he cover the minus 500? If he submits him, yeah. If Bobby Green does what he did against Paddy Pimblett and jumps into a submission, I could see Zellhuber locking up an anaconda, a Darce, a guillotine against Bobby. If he's making silly wrestling errors and leaving his neck out all silly willy, I could totally see that here. But as far, if this fight's a striking battle on the feet, Daniel Zellhuber's not going to look 500, minus 500. He's just not. So for my official predict, give me Daniel Zellhuber. But just because Bobby Green's old, there's a submission upside for Daniel, and Daniel maybe could land better body kicks and keep the fight at range and maybe use his reach advantage. But I could totally see Bobby. If Bobby were to win a decision here, I'd be yeah, this is why I didn't put Daniel Zellhuber in my parlay, right? There is some value maybe on that Zellhuber sub. But other than a Zellhuber, Darce, Anaconda, or Guillotine, I don't well, I don't know. I don't see that. Or maybe under on significant strikes too. I mean, like this fight could finish early, or he could just suck and not land many significant strikes against Bobby Green. Bobby Green actually, and I gave this bet out earlier in the week, completely free. Bobby Green, last 10 opponents have all gone under the strike total for Daniel Zellhuber right now. I think it's sitting at like 66.5. 10 out of 10 of Bobby Green's last opponents have gone under this total. So something to keep in mind. But moving on. The co-main event, David Martinez versus Marlon Vera. David Martinez, 13-1, 5-5 with a 67.5-inch reach. Chito Vera with the much more extensive UFC record of 23-11-1, standing at 5'8 with a 70.5-inch reach. This fight is going to be closer. Like, David Martinez, that line is kind of getting out of hand here, right? You know, he looked really good against Rob Font, but I think Chito Vera is a lot better than Rob Font. And if Chito, like, does stuff like he does, like, in later rounds of the fight, like, if you were to just go out and just be, like, a little bit more aggressive in round one, you know, I think he could win here. I think this fight could be closer than the odds entail. The value side for this, I feel like this fight could go to split decision. You know, maybe Chito wins, but then they give a split decision to David Martinez. Like, it's hard to hit David Martinez. And Chito talks about getting active in round one. I don't think it's ever going to happen. You know, for my official prediction, give me David Martinez by decision. It's minus 215, but give me David Martinez by split decision if you wanted some value. All right, main event, Brandon Moreno, Lonier Kavanaugh. Brandon Moreno, 23, 8-2, 5'7 with a 70-inch reach. Lonier Kavanaugh, 9-1, 5'6 with a 67-inch reach. Brandon Moreno coming into this fight with a lot more UFC experience than Lonier Kavanaugh. Lonier Kavanaugh coming off a round 2 knockout versus Charles Johnson, where he looked really good in round 1, but then faded off a cliff completely. Brandon Moreno is going to have the cardio advantage here. If Lonier Kavanaugh doesn't get this fight, if Brandon Moreno doesn't get Lonier Kavanaugh out in round 1, I struggle to see how he wins here. I mean, if he was falling apart in round 2 against Charles Johnson, unless Brandon Moreno is miraculously somehow clearly washed, I don't see how Lonier wins this fight outside of a round 1 knockout. Maybe play that. You know, it's plus 2,000. Maybe play Lonier round 1 KO. I think that's his winning equity is covered by that prop. But if it gets like halfway through round 2, Brandon Moreno's gonna like just out jab him, out kick him, maybe even out wrestle him through the rest of the fight. You know, maybe even Brandon could get around 3 or round 4. I don't think Brandon's like as aggressive or flamboyant with the striking to where he could knock out Kavanaugh like Charles Johnson did. But like I said, if this fight gets to round 3 and 4, maybe he does. Maybe he gets a submission in round 3 or 4. For my official prediction, give me Brandon Moreno. I feel like that's a parlay piece. If you could parlay Brandon Moreno maybe with Edgar Shires, Emanol Rodriguez, one of those two guys, Santiago Luna, honestly, I mean, I think you could get, you know, a pretty solid number there. I feel like a good portion of these Mexican fighters are going to win tonight. But, you know, whatever. But, all right, this is going to conclude our UFC Mexico City live betting breakdown. Like I said, if you guys want the rest of my bets for UFC Mexico City, I've got the link in the bio, 7-day free trial going on right now.